Welcome to the Bojack Podcast Horseman Obviously. This is episode number 11. My name is Dominic and I'm joined by Matthew.
Hello.
The aim of this podcast is for me to convince Matthew that Bojack Horseman is the greatest animated TV show of all time. And in this episode, we will be discussing Series 1, Episode 11, Downer Ending. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Honestly, I'm very sore. I
doing?
had a very big gym session today.
Okay.
I pushed myself to new levels.
Thumbs are setting in already.
Yeah. My upper back is a mess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't envy you tomorrow then. If
No,
you're sorted
I
out.
am going to be in a world of pain tomorrow. But it's all my own fault, so we're okay with it.
Do you want to just go through what happens in this episode then?
Yeah, so this episode goes totally off the rails compared to what I've been watching so far. I don't know the exact timing, but I would say it's probably about the first third of the episode starts where the last one left off, and Bojack's not happy with the book that Diane's produced, and they're at Penguin Publishing and discussing what to do. And after a fallout, Bojack decides that he can write another book before the deadline on Friday in, I think, 5 days. And in order to do that, he assembles a team of himself, Sarah Lynn, and Todd, and they take loads of drugs and just go on a wild psychedelic experience trying to write this book, which surprisingly doesn't end particularly successfully.
It's directed by Amy Winfrey and it's written by Raphael Bob Waxberg and Katie Purdy.
There's a lot of cartoons that have these kind of episodes.
Like a drug fuel episode, right?
Like Trippy. Did you watch Beavis and Butthead?
No, I haven't.
Okay, there's Beavis and Butthead Do America, and it's a really funny film. It's great, but there's a huge psychedelic part in the middle of that, and I don't know. I think all cartoons have their quote unquote psychedelic episode.
Do you think it's easy to do in a cartoon?
Yes.
So in an animation, because you just can draw whatever you want.
Well, yeah, because it's very hard to do in real life. I think the one film that does spring to mind is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Did it very well, and there's a few other films that also do it well, but
you're relying on special effects.
It does lend it more to cartoon because you can.
Okay.
It's easier to contort the fabric of reality in a cartoon. And previously, I might have just looked at this as another psychedelic episode, quote unquote psychedelic episode. But given my experience earlier this year, it hit me pretty hard.
Okay.
It's now become common and popular in certain societies and certain parts of the medical field that it's understood that the use of psychedelics can be used to treat chronic mental health disorders. And this what people listening don't, but I went to South America earlier this year to take ayahuasca to treat long-term chronic anxiety disorder. And suffice to say, it's the wildest week of my life. And it was really hard and it was really difficult. And I went into it with not using ayahuasca as a recreational substance, but as a therapeutic substance. And it helped me to dig into things in my past and work through things that I either wasn't aware of or that I was holding on to. So watching this episode, there are parts of this episode where it is just drug-fueled madness. But then there's part of this episode where there's bits that come up where Bojack's on a vision quest, or whatever you want to call it. It really hit me hard, and I don't know if it would have if I hadn't had that experience myself. I don't know.
This is one of the most memorable moments in the show for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to lots of people about the show, but a few that I have tend to bring up this scene, this moment quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what it is that by the end of this episode, I think Bojack has come to some really stark realizations about himself. I think he knows himself better at the end of this episode. Whether that continues on through to the future episodes, I don't know. But I feel that he was on a journey.
Okay.
And he's come out of the other side of it, for better or worse, different.
Okay.
He knows more about himself and who he is and his past. And I think that is, as now, like I said, psychedelics are being used in all kinds of therapeutic ways. I think it speaks to that. I don't know if I'm just reading too much into it or thinking too much into it, but by the end of the episode, that was the major thing that really hit me.
Yes. No. Okay. So we will go through the episode, and we might, as we're talking through points, we might discover a bit more about what we both think about the drugs, the drug tripping scene. So this episode starts quite prominently, I think, with it raining. We're outside Penguin Publishing's, where Diane and Bojack are discussing the book with Pinky Penguin. But like I said, I just feel like the rain is setting them. It's the first mood setting tool that we're given to show that this is going to be a very different episode.
There's a to let sign as well on the front of the.
So they're really on the last legs.
Yeah.
I did kind of like the pigeon as well in the rain. He was flying into the wind, but he's got an umbrella in front of him as he's flying, which I thought was quite nice. So Bojack reads a line from the book. Bojack swallowed a dozen pastries in the time it took the caterer to unwrap a fruit tray. When she asked where the pastries had gone, Bojack claimed he had no idea, spraying her with bits of buttery crust. And Pinky laughs and he says, I did this once, but with holiday cookies, and I had sprinkled all over my sweater. And he starts laughing to himself about it. And I think this is quite nice because it's showing Bojack not understanding that what Diane is doing is portraying him as a real person, and we like people that seem a bit more real is her sort of argument. There's a little bit of comedy actually in how Bojack's reading the line in a very angry tone. So it's almost like someone's describing a comedy scene in an angry way.
Yeah.
I think that's quite nice.
It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yes. So Diane says, see, people respond to the flawed portrait I painted of you. They see themselves in it. And she goes on to say, when people find out that someone like you, who seems larger than life, is actually as wounded and vulnerable as they are, it makes them feel less lonely. And Bojack disagrees with this and he says, oh, no, maybe that's what flawed, sad fatties want from other celebrities. But for Bojack Horseman, they want a heroic horse stud who is awesome and can save them from their flawed, sad, fatty lives.
Yeah, that's just standard Bojack flying into it.
But it's also like, I don't know. Yeah, he hasn't got the idea of being vulnerable, has he?
No. It's also, we know Bojack's like this, but it's like an arrogance that's like, I don't know if he really does think that he's better than everyone else, but he wants to portray that he's better than everyone else, and he wants everyone to think that he thinks he's better than everyone else.
Yes, yeah. So I think the jump from being strong to vulnerable, the effort it takes to display those two different sides takes more work than it seems sometimes.
Yeah.
I think Bojack's still stuck at that stage where he's like, I think he does know that he should be, it is a thing about being vulnerable and open, but I think he's too scared to take the jump at the moment.
Yeah.
Until later on when he agrees for the book to be published.
There's also the argument to say that it's good to show your flaws, but I think he's aware that he has probably more flaws than the average person.
Okay. So maybe he's apprehensive about what flaws he should be showing.
Yeah, it's like
I'm not going to show any flaws then until I know that that's safe to show.
Once you open Pandora's box,
there's
no point it back in there when you find out just what an awful person he is.
So Pinky interrupts the argument and makes the point that they all recognise that Diane broke contract by releasing the first 2 chapters of the book. But the response has been amazing, and he wants the book to go to print by the end of the week. So then Bojack says, what if I told you I could have a new book by the end of the week instead? And Diane questions this and says, when's the last time you ever read a book? The Fern by John Grisham, which I think is a reference to the last time Bojack might have read a book.
Okay.
Because The Fern came out in 1991.
Okay.
And so I don't think there's I think it feels like she references that book for a reason.
Yeah.
But I think it's more just to set the day of because I think it was a very popular. Well, it was a very popular book.
Yeah.
Bojack then mocks Diane as a writer, saying, "You think what you do is so hard. Oh, I'm a writer. I go to a coffee shop with my laptop and my notebook and my dumb glasses that I have to wear because I'm so important. I need to see clearly." This is where Bojack's starting to get quite mean here. But I think there is something about the cliches of a writer that he's sort of, I think in mocking them, he's actually admiring the qualities.
Okay.
Like it's actually being like, I think a lot of the time to mock someone, you have to actually think it's quite cool or actually think it's quite admirable or with what they do.
Okay.
So it's like, you think like, I wish I could just go to a coffee shop and write a book with my coffee and my laptop and be like professional.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of envy in that as well. Bojack goes on to say, "You think you're so much smarter than everybody. Well, guess what? I spent as much time with you as you did with me. Why don't I write a book about how you married Mr. Peanut Butter because he's too dumb to see how much better you think you are than him?" So Diane says, "I know you're upset," but Bojack continues and says, "I'm not upset. I'm just sick of nerd girls like you beating up on stars like me. It's pathetic. I'm sorry no one wanted to date you in high school, Diane, but I don't see why I have to suffer because you were never especially pretty or interesting."
So up until this point, what he said, he shouldn't have said it.
Yes.
I think he's out of line for saying it, but I think he's right.
Yes.
You know, Diane does fall into that stereotypical, almost arrogant, know-it-all writer type.
Okay.
LA coffee shop.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
He said like the coffee shop.
Yeah, that it's a total stereotype, but I think she absolutely fits into it. And the comment on her relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter, I think is pretty much spot on. So the way that he says it is mean, and he shouldn't say it, but I think that he's true. It hurts because it's true. Now, when he goes down this route, it's just like, nah, too much.
Yeah, that's the line that crosses crosses the line at that point. I think.
Yeah.
But also maybe it's crossing the line because he knows it's true that she wasn't the pretty girl or she wasn't the popular girl.
Yeah.
But it's like a dig that he knows is going to hurt.
Yeah.
Diane just replies with, "You really let me down, Bojack," and walks out the office. And I do like the little joke here where Bojack sits down and then says, "I apologise for her outburst."
Yeah.
Pinky, like it's Diane that's been compensating.
It's such a Bojack line.
Yes, he can't.
So Bojack.
So it's almost like this situation has happened completely differently in his head.
Yes. Yeah.
He's been very calm and reasonable, and she's been a bit unhinged.
Yep.
Pinky then says, "Well, if you really think you can write a better book by Friday, go ahead." And then Bojack basically confirms this by saying that he's going to write a book that's going to kick his dick off. But also, I think at this point, we remember at the beginning of this show, he was struggling to write this book for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But now he says he's going to write it in a week. I don't think anybody watching it would think that he's actually now going to write a book by Friday.
Oh, was he supposed to be writing it himself at the start?
Yes.
Oh, I totally forgot.
Probably it's been a long time.
Yeah, totally forgot that.
But he basically, so the first episode, he's trying to write a book and he keeps pushing the deadline further back. And eventually Pinky says, "We're bringing in a ghostwriter for Diane to write it."
But then she's not a ghostwriter. She just ends up writing the whole thing anyway.
Well, she's supposed to be ghostwriter, and then she writes a completely different book.
Yeah.
After the opening credits, we find Bojack in his office trying to write this book, and he writes chapter 1, and he noticeably changes the 1 as in the number 1 to the word 1. It shows how much he's procrastinating again, basically.
Yeah.
He's messing about, like with the fonts in a bit. He's messing about with small details and he can't actually write the book.
The psychedelic journey part of this video, of this psychedelic journey part of this episode, it made me completely forget about this section about procrastination.
Okay.
Because I thought this is what the episode was going to be about.
Yes.
There's a few scenes that involves some heavy procrastination, which everyone in the world is susceptible to.
Yes.
To varying degrees.
Bojack gets a call from Princess Caroline, and she asks, "Why are you rewriting the book? Diane's version is great." And after coughing up a bit of a hairball, she reads, "The only long-standing relationship in Bojack's life is with his agent, Princess Caroline. Her loyalty must come from a deep-rooted faith that she is talented enough to sustain the career of a man that society perceives as a joke." But Bojack replies, "Yeah, I'm not such a fan of that one, because obviously it doesn't make him look very good. No one wants to be known as a man whose career society perceives as a joke. That's not a nice thing to be said about you."
And here's a comment on how people pick things that are favourable to themselves as well, though, because this is a very complimentary of
the Princess Caroline. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I sort of mean. Like and this is where it's difficult almost as well, because it's easy to like things that are positive about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But Diane's point of this book is to try and get Bojack to understand that it's also the negative parts of himself that he should like.
Yes.
Because that's what makes him more vulnerable, makes him more appealing to people. Bojack goes on to say, "This is my last chance to make people love me again. If this goes out, everybody's going to see the real me. Now I spend a lot of time with the real me, and believe me, nobody's going to love that guy. Now, if you excuse me, I need to go and take a shower so I can't tell if I'm crying or not."
Occasionally, Bojack has these super intense moments of self-awareness.
Yes.
And acknowledging himself. And it's like the mask slips for a second.
Yes.
And he is honest about who he really is. And he says it so matter-of-factly and like almost like a joke that he's still not fully committed to the idea that he's not a nice person and he doesn't like who he is.
Yeah. All of this paragraph that he says is, to use probably Diane's word, quite humanizing, where I think we all think that the real us, no one wants to show the real you, like the real me.
Yeah.
And we're all worried about the real me coming out and what other people might think of that. And Bojack's saying exactly the same thing here. He's saying, I'm worried about people seeing the real me. But also in the second part, I really like the idea that he won't even admit to himself that he's crying. So he's trying to hide the fact that he's in pain to himself.
Yeah.
In an earlier episode, they could have done a cutscene there and we might have been showing him crying in the shower.
Yeah.
But they've not done it. And I think the fact that he plants the seed of the visual in our head works a lot better than if there was a cutscene.
Yeah.
So I think it's a nice line and it was done well. Yeah, I also think there's something that, I don't know if I've ever had a situation, maybe I've had a couple, if I'm being honest, but like when he's crying in the shower, I'm thinking of him thinking how profound this moment is for him, of like, the world is such an awful place and I'm such an awful person, or like, if it was a movie of my life, like this would be like one of their dramatic scenes.
Okay.
But when he looks back on that moment, or when we look back on moments like that, we would think, like if I look back on past Dominic in moments like that, I'm thinking, you're an idiot. Why are you sat crying in the shower? Thinking how profound this moment is, or how dramatic this moment is. Like you've got over it like 5-10 minutes later.
Not necessarily.
Okay. You mean if it's a more intense thing that is affected in more detail?
Well, firstly, yeah, it might be something that affects you more deeply and it might be more long-lasting than that, but maybe it's a moment of true spiritual growth. And the reason that you get over it so quickly, 5 or 10 minutes later, is because that moment was so heavy and so profound that it flushed out of your system and you needed to get rid of it.
So I'm sort of playing on the idea that how trivial that previous moment of profoundness was.
Yes.
But you're saying it's not because it's actually so profound that you were able to move.
It might seem trivial from your new perspective after you've shared this heavy weight, but at the time, it was nothing but trivial because it caused you to cry in the shower.
So if I think back of moments like that and think, Dominic, you were an idiot. Like you'd say, no, Dominic. You'd say to me that Dominic wasn't an idiot. He was just.
I'd say, well done. You worked through something really difficult. You were brave and strong, and you've come out of it. You've come out of it the other side so strong that you can look back at it and go, what an idiot that guy was. But
what if it was over something that was just completely meaningless?
What, the cheese was too expensive in the supermarket?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey man, everyone's fighting their own battles.
I didn't like the look of that guy, how he looked at me. Now I feel like...
Well, what I would say is that if something so trivial and small like that triggered you to have that much of a visceral response, there's probably more than going on underneath.
Okay. So Bojack now goes into his bedroom trying to write this book, and he starts messing around with fonts. And he realises he's been messing around with fonts for about 6 hours. What he actually displays is potentially like a nice little comedy routine about fonts. So I think Bojack's mistake here is that he's trying to write a book for people to like him by portraying an image of himself. But actually, I think he should just write funny jokes.
Okay.
Like, what's this? He's like, Comic Sans, no one takes you seriously. Yeah. It's like the way he characterises all of the fonts. Yeah.
And he's looking for...
It's actually quite interesting.
He's looking for Verdana, and he's like, what are you doing hiding right at the end?
Yeah, quite like. I think there's some comedy there that he's not exploring, and I wish that we saw more comedy from Bojack, to be fair.
I think there's
stand-up comedy.
I think there's some weird subjects that almost... not everyone, but I would say 95% of people can get on board with. This a bit obscure, a bit of weird. I think fonts is one of them. Yeah. What's your favourite font?
Yeah. I don't have one.
Okay.
I can't have one.
Okay.
Because I don't know enough about them.
Okay.
I'm limited by, I know my naivety when it comes to fonts.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say I have one.
Okay. I understand. I mean,
Helvetica.
Yeah, that is. There's a reason why it's the most popular font because it's very good. Helvetica is my go-to, but unless I want to be a bit more artistic, like if I'm doing titles for a video or something,
I think he would have something to say about how everybody likes Helvetica and how Helvetica is like everybody's standard font that they go to. But yeah, no, that's it. I think there's actually a nice bit of writing or a nice bit of comedy there that he's not exploiting. He then goes to Diane's book again, One Trick Pony, and goes to read another section of it again. And as he's reading it, it leads us to a cutscene where Bojack is standing in front of the painting behind his desk, explaining to Diane, you can see by the teeny tiny brushstrokes that this is very expensive. This colour, this one they don't even have a name for, that's how exclusive it is. Diane goes on to explain in the book. She wonders where this came from. There were two obvious suspects. One, her mother Beatrice, heiress to the Sugarman Sugar Cube fortune and used to certain comforts, and his working class father, Butterscotch Horseman, who struggled and often failed to provide these comforts. Or maybe it was something even at which point Bojack stops reading and throws the book into the bin and tries to set it on fire with some matches. In a overly dramatic act, he tries to make a point about this book being rubbish, but even him lighting a match and trying to set it on fire doesn't work.
Well, it's a very, not a cliche, but very common scene from like films and TV. You got a wire paper basket and you just throw a match in and the thing goes up in flames, when it probably wouldn't just burst into flames straight away. Also, I don't know if I'm wrong, but when in this bit when he mentioned that his mum was the heiress to some sugar company,
right? Yeah,
I don't remember hearing that before in the show.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is the first point that we've known that she's come from a family of fortune.
Yeah.
Also, the father wasn't from this sort of background, so there's a mismatch. But also Diane here is, I think part of how she's humanising him is explaining where he came from
Yeah.
and why he does the actions. And I think understanding why someone is like something often leads us to like them a bit more, because we understand it feels like it wasn't entirely their fault. Like if Bojack has been in between this contentious relationship between the mother and the father, maybe that's caused him to be a bit like the person who he is today. So there's less blame associated to him. I would say there's no blame associated to him because he is a product of his environment rather than anything internally. After trying to set this book on fire, Bojack goes into the living room where Todd is sat. And I just want to point out that Todd's still living in the house, even though they've sort of fallen out regarding knowing about the sabotage of the rock opera.
Yeah, I just assumed that he'd moved in with Mr. Peanut Butter.
Yeah, he's still living there, yeah. Well, maybe that's explained a bit later in the episode. But he interrupts Todd and says he can't be distracted at the moment because he needs to work. And for a moment, they sit there in silence. And Todd turns the page and Bojack says, read louder much. So he's like waiting for Todd to distract him so he can pretend that Todd is distracting him more than he is. He also blames Todd for dropping toaster strudel crumbs all over the floor, even though Todd's not eating anything and he's eating a toaster strudel. So the crumbs have clearly come from himself and he's just trying to put blame on everybody else. But this procrastination goes on even further when he tries to hoover up the crumbs. And the hoover breaks and he's like, I don't have time for this. So he gets a smaller hoover to clean the bigger hoover, and then the smaller hoover breaks as well. And he's like, God, why are you keeping me from working? Where we can see that he just doesn't want to work, basically.
Yeah, so two things here. One, it clearly shows that Bojack doesn't know how to use a vacuum cleaner.
Okay. I haven't thought about that.
You don't empty a vacuum cleaner by hoovering out the contents with another vacuum cleaner.
No, maybe.
You just empty it out into the bin.
Yeah.
So to me, that shows that I don't know if he has a cleaning lady or if he has like Todd or I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I just thought it was weird. I was like, why are you trying to empty a vacuum cleaner with another vacuum cleaner? Yeah. Secondly, the cleaning thing is like the procrastination thing, right?
It's the ultimate, yeah.
Like, I know I was guilty of it, but how many students at university like cleaned their room, did the dishes, did some gardening before actually like sitting down to actually start writing their essay? Like, you can find anything to distract you from what you should actually be doing. And cleaning is I think it's like the common cliche.
Maybe it's an easy one to use as well because it's like, no one would tell you that it's okay for things to be messy.
Yeah.
So they like people expect it to be clean. So it's like you need to put up a pretend.
It still needs doing sometimes.
Yes.
And it's productive.
Yeah. So Bojack goes to buy a new vacuum cleaner, but then when he comes out of the shop, he has a moment and he goes back into the shop and he seems to have brought all of the vacuum cleaners. And now he's got them all hoovering the contents of each other in like an endless circle. So he finally starts writing, and he starts writing about his childhood. And he says, my parents loved me so much, it was crazy. I remember one Sunday afternoon where my mother said, your father and I want to spend quality family time together. All the kids envy your intelligence and kickball ability. Here's an ice cream sundae. And then he says, no, wait, change that. Here's an ice cream sandwich. No, wait, here's a dreamsicle. This is clearly the opposite of what Bojack thought his childhood was like. I think he knows his childhood wasn't very good.
Okay.
Because if he was writing a book about himself and he wanted to say how good it was, he knows things like parents wanting to spend family time together. He knows the cliches, and he knows he's got this idea of what a good family life is, which he's trying to present. But he also clearly is lying in the fact that he keeps changing the dessert.
Yeah, the changing of the dessert was the confirmation from the writers of Bojack that he's lying.
Making up as he goes along.
Because the things that he's saying are over the top and extreme and whatever, but it's like feasibly it could have been said to him, regardless of how outlandish it is. But just to confirm that he is lying. The bit about, no, it was an ice cream sundae, no, it was an ice cream sandwich, no, it was a popsicle, whatever. That confirms to us that he is making it up.
Yes. But and I think even further, I think it confirms that. So if he's making it up, I think it means the opposite is true.
Yeah.
So I think his parents didn't want to spend time together with themselves or with him. But also the way he says, all the kids admire your intelligence. So I think he never got that sort of comment from his parents that, like, you're bright or well done, you're good at this or you're good at that. While Bojack has been writing, we've been seeing this scene in his imagination with his parents and him as a young boy. But now his dad takes over in his imagination and slaps him round the back of the head and says, "Nice writing, Shakespeare." So he comes out of the writing and he realises he needs something to help him focus. And at first he says coffee, and he tries coffee, and then he's like, cigarettes, and he tries some cigarettes. And then he tries some tequila. And then finally he says, no, I just need the right music to do drugs to.
Yeah.
And I quite like how in each of these scenes, he's actually getting further and further away from the task of writing. So at first he's got his laptop put on the pool table, and then he's in the jacuzzi with bubbles around him. So it's just getting further and further removed away from the actual task of writing.
Yeah, no, I think it also in this scene, could be a commentary on doing anything but the thing, like waiting to do the thing. Like, oh, I can't write the thing because I don't have enough coffee, or I can't do it because I'm not in the right location. I need to be in the bath.
Yeah.
So procrastination is a part of it, but I think it's also people don't feel like they're ready to start something. The best way to do something is just do it.
Okay, yeah.
And like a lot of people go, oh, I'm not ready to do this, or I'm not in the right environment to do this. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference.
There is a nice joke where, and again, the music helps a lot here, because as he's saying, I need the right music, we're hearing classical music. I mean, I used to hear it a lot, that classical music helps your brain concentrate or helps your brain grow, or what is it, Beethoven is encourage you listening to. There's a thing about classical music being the right music to work to, if we want to put it like that.
Yeah.
But as he says, do the right music to do drugs to, as he finishes that sentence, it changes from classical to like a clubhouse sort of music style.
Yeah.
And I think that was the way they switched the music quite seamlessly there worked really well.
I'll be honest, you keep mentioning like the soundtrack and the music and stuff. Yeah. I didn't pick up on this at all throughout this episode.
No, do you know what? I'd be interested for you to go back and watch it again and listen to it, because I don't think I noticed it a lot. But this time when I've sat down and watched it and taken, in the way I do take the notes, it became a lot more apparent of how varied the score was.
Okay.
And I don't know if it is usually, I just don't notice it.
Right.
It just felt, as I was watching it this time, it was really complimentary and really varied. So Bojack then reveals that Sarah Lynn and Todd are sat on the sofa with him, and Bojack thanks Sarah Lynn for coming over to give him drugs, even though the last time he saw her, he was trying to encourage her to stop taking drugs.
Yeah.
So he says again, thank you for coming over and giving me drugs. So maybe it shows how I'm thinking about that episode now, and how much I was thinking about how Bojack actually wanted to help that person, this person, Sarah Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it just shows how it was almost just something to do.
Yeah.
In that episode.
Yeah, because he felt guilty.
Oh, I haven't got anything to do.
Yeah,
a bit guilty.
I've done this at the time. I don't think he was just trying to appease his own guilt. That was all it was. He felt responsible for the mess that she was in.
So Sarah Lynn says you can't go wrong with Doctor Who's drugs. And Doctor Who explains these are drugs that he gives to college students so that when they come to, their term papers have written themselves.
Yes, classic name joke coming up here.
It is. Okay, we'll talk about it a little bit. Bojack picks up the doctor's business card and realises his name is spelt H-U, which leads to a joke about, or leads to a continuous joke about Bojack and Sarah Lynn and Todd keep getting mixed up about what sort of who they're actually talking about.
Well, I think Sarah Lynn and Todd don't know who Doctor Who is that Bojack's referring to. Well, Todd does, I think.
Okay.
But I don't think Sarah Lynn knows. I think it's a generational thing. Even though Doctor Who is still it's happening now, but you could argue it's not the same as it was.
Yeah, and I'm not even a Doctor Who fan, and I know it's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I feel about this joke, because I feel like the essence of the joke is your name sounds a bit different. It's almost like you speak a different language to us, but those words, we have those words, but they're a little bit different. So it's sort of like just poking fun at a difference rather than it's poking fun of a cultural difference for the sake that it's different.
I didn't see that at all.
Okay.
I just saw it as a name joke.
Okay.
I think I said this before, and there was another joke like this previously.
Yeah, so in the last episode, they keep getting mixed up because the characters.
Yeah.
It's different. This is playing on the fact that a name in this gentleman's country is H-U.
Yeah.
And they pronounce that who, but we pronounce that differently. It's sort of like an ignorance of cultures, though.
I know.
Because if you were from that culture, you wouldn't get the joke.
You might do if they air Doctor Who in that country.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it. Maybe I'm being too woke or something like that.
Possibly.
It feels a little bit off, actually, I think.
An example of this for me, relatively comparatively. It's good, isn't it? Is you ever watched Blackadder?
Yeah, I've seen.
You know, Officer Darling in Blackadder Goes Forth. Yeah, for me, that's one of the greatest jokes in TV history.
Go on. What's the joke?
So Stephen Fry's subordinate officer, I think might be Hugh Laurie. I think his name is Officer Darling.
Yes, right.
But in that kind of military era, they would refer to each other by their surnames. So a lot of the time, he doesn't call him Officer Darling; he calls him Darling.
Yes, but everyone thinks that he's like affectionately calling him Darling.
The people they don't realise what it sounds like, but to us as the audience,
okay,
we know what it sounds like.
Yeah, but again, that's part of the same culture, though, isn't it?
I think you're trying to find a racial problem here that doesn't exist.
That's what I'm saying. Am I being a bit woke? Am I being too sensitive?
I'd say so, yeah.
But there is a point where Doctor Who asks Sarah Lynn if Bojack is telling a joke. Because, they get it mixed up as well with telling a knock-knock joke, I think.
Yeah.
So, like, who's there? So Sarah Lynn says sometimes she just laughs after he talks so that he will leave her alone. But before Doctor Who leaves, he gives them a very confusing set of instructions. Bojack then tells Todd and Sarah Lynn to focus up as they have a book to write. And all three of them are furiously typing away on the laptops with sort of crazy bloodshot eyes because they're under the influence of whatever they've been taking. Bojack then checks in on the pair and asks Todd, how are the heartwarming anecdotes going? And he says he's writing about the time that they became best friends. But even here, Bojack sort of says, can we make that pretty good friends? Even after he's been a terrible person to him. And Todd at this point seems to be like a bit friendlier to him. He's like, well, let's not tell people that we're best friends. Like, I don't want to be labelled as saying I don't want to be your best friend to someone's actually quite a dig.
Mm-hmm. Especially when he's been such a dick to him.
Yes.
And Todd's helping to write this book.
Yeah.
And he's massively under the influence of drugs, which usually puts people in a better mood.
Exactly, yeah. Then Bojack asks Sarah Lynn how the horsing around years are coming on. And she says she's writing about the time that they had Hulk Hogan as a guest star and told them to say no to drugs, which obviously seems like a pointless message now. But I also think maybe shows a bit of the hypocrisy of the sort of messages that you can come across on TV shows, particularly like no drug messages.
Yeah, especially given the amount of drugs that Hulk Hogan was probably on
Exactly.
during his heyday in the 90s.
But I'm also thinking about like
Supposedly, I don't know.
Bojack then tells them to keep typing and follows up with, "If only Hulk Hogan could see us now." And Sarah Lynn says, "What?" And Bojack goes, "That thing about Hulk Hogan that you were just talking about." And she says, "Well, that was like 4 hours ago." And we do get a bit of a blurred animation here. We get a bit of a fuzz.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So Sarah Lynn and Todd send over all the work that they've been doing. And Bojack goes, "Wow, we're at 216 pages. That's almost as long as The Firm by John Grisham." Bojack also says it's surprisingly literate and insightful. It's a beach read that you can thumb through in a wing chair. He then goes on to mock Diane again by pretending that she said, "Oh, my fingers are cramping from all the typing. It's like they're having their period." And Todd says, "Did Diane really say that?" And Bojack says, "No, she didn't. But his fingers are really cramping." And he says, "It's like they're having their period." So the very thing that he's just mocked Diane for, he's now experiencing himself. This is where Sarah Lynn demonstrates the fake laugh as well that she is explaining to Doctor Who later. And then when Bojack asks if she was just fake laughing, she does another fake laugh to emphasize that she's still not listening and she still wants him to stop talking to her. So Bojack then says, "We just need a way to end this thing." And Todd says, "Maybe it was Earth all along." And Bojack quickly says, "No, not that, but something like that. Keep thinking."
Yeah, obviously a reference to Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, do we think that's the most referenced plot twist?
It's one of the best.
It's like I feel like it's like that or the "It was all a dream."
Yeah,
I like the two big twists that I think everyone always speaks about. So Bojack then walks off into the bathroom to wash his face, but when he looks up into the mirror, we see a real unanimated horse in the reflection, which I think this is the next moment. We had the bit of the time skip earlier, but I think this is like the start of the trip that he's going on, basically. And I think I'm struggling to think about how I first remember this scene. Did this catch you off guard?
A little bit, yeah. This is the first time in the whole show that we've seen completely different animation to what we're accustomed to.
We then cut back to the sofa where Bojack then asks Todd and Sarah Lynn if they have switched clothes. And it seems like they have switched clothes, but Todd answers no, but he answers it in Sarah Lynn's voice. And Sarah Lynn answers in gibberish. Then when Bojack questions what the pair said, we then cut back to them and they're back in their own clothes again. And Sarah Lynn says she likes Bojack's idea for the ending better, but Bojack clearly doesn't remember what he said. And Todd explains that his ending was about how he ended up in Maine. Sarah Lynn says, "I like the part where you swim in the lake in summer." And Bojack adds, "When I get too old to take care of myself, I go for one last swim. I know I can't make it back to shore. I'm too weak, I'm too tired, so I just let the water take me under." And this is coupled with a visual of Bojack in the lake, but also an old Bojack just sort of sinking into the water.
Sarah Lynn does point this out, but it struck me, and I liked it, that they were making it up. Like, they're supposed to be writing a book about his life,
Right.
But they've already reached the end of his life, many, many years in the future.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I was like, okay, so this has really taken a turn for the wild.
They are.
And I was like, but are they seeing something that is going to come to fruition? Like, is this actually the truth of how it ends?
Yes.
But yeah, the fact that they've gone
so far past.
decades, years into the future already was like, okay, they've really gone off on a tangent here.
Todd sort of goes ish downer ending. So I've got to point that out because that's the title of the episode.
Yeah.
But also Todd's sort of suggesting here that we don't want downer endings.
Yeah.
We want happy endings. And Sarah Lynn interrupts and says, "Wait a minute. Maybe you don't know the ending because you haven't lived it." Todd adds, if you want to like finish the book, you'd have to like die tonight. And Sarah Lynn excitedly says, oh, I know, I should murder you, which they all laugh about. And Sarah Lynn goes on to say, I'm serious. Just think about it. If the girl you raised on TV killed you in real life, people would eat that shit up. And they would. That's a great story. And she's right, that is a great story. Yeah. But then Todd and Sarah Lynn start looking menacingly at Bojack and say, kill, kill, kill. So Bojack is now dressed in armour made of items from the kitchen, and Sarah Lynn and Todd seem like they're trying to kill him. So as they go through this like mini battle scene, and things calm down for some reason, and Todd is bandaging up Bojack because they've cut him a little bit. And Bojack says, so what did we learn? We learned if we're going to do drugs, we should do them at home where it's safe to do them together.
Which makes no sense in the context of this scene.
Okay. I was about to say, is that a better message than saying no to drugs during this scene?
It's just nonsensical. There's literally blood splatters up the window.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how safe it is to do them at home together.
Bojack then pulls out a gun-shaped item, which causes Todd and Sarah Lynn to scream. But Bojack says, don't worry, I have a gun to keep us safe from intruders and each other, which is always the comment about gun ownership, isn't it, in America? Todd then questions whether it's Bojack's gun-shaped lighter or his lighter-shaped gun. Bojack says, don't worry, it's just his lighter. But then he goes to light his lighter and he shoots a bullet out of the end of what is actually his gun, which shoots off the end of his cigarette, scaring all of them.
Saw this coming a mile off.
Yes, it was obviously going to be a gun, wasn't it?
But the following line I didn't see coming at all. It says something like, so what did I give to that baby?
Right, okay, yes, yeah. It sounds like he must have given his lighter-shaped gun.
Whichever one it is. You don't want a baby to have a lighter or a gun. It's like, when he says it, I'm like...
Can you actually give something to a baby?
I don't know if it's part of the trip or if it's an old memory or...
Yeah. Todd says he's holding a gun too, and Bojack corrects him by saying, no, that's a broom. But then all of a sudden, they switch, and Bojack is holding the broom, and Todd is holding a gun. And this causes Bojack to get more confused as they keep switching between them until they both have guns. And I should say they're more like rifles, aren't they?
Yeah, they're assault rifles.
Yeah. When Bojack asks Todd if they're holding guns or brooms, Todd says, I can't tell anymore. I guess we'll just have to shoot them at each other at the same time to find out.
Yeah, I when he said this, I'm like, yeah, the audience also doesn't know whether you're holding
yes,
a gun or a broom. It was just, wild.
But I do like, I've written about, I did like the animation at this bit as well, where it sort of zooms in and out and it's like a few silhouettes of the other person while one of the people, while Todd or Bojack is talking.
Yeah, there's a bit where Bojack's really small and he's literally like hanging off the edge of the barrel that Todd's holding the gun. The perspective goes really wild here.
But this is also where Bojack seems to break this trip for a bit, or this moment, and he says, just to be clear, we're shooting each other to determine whether we're holding guns or brooms, right? Not because you're still mad about the whole me sabotaging you with the rock opera and your live stream and such and such. And Todd answers, as you know, I was hurt, but then I realised that's just how you are, and maybe I just need to stop expecting you to be a good person. So that way I won't get hurt when you're not. It's not a nice way to have a relationship with someone, but I think, it just shows that they're not going to be in this friendship going forward. Sarah Lynn then complains that she doesn't have a gun. This leads to Bojack saying, if everybody had a gun, then no one would need a gun. I think we just solved the gun crisis in America. They then celebrate by taking more drugs. And Todd says, now all we need to do is solve the drug crisis in America. And Bojack answers, well, that's easy. We'll just take them all. And then after this next binge of drugs, they all seem to be passed out. And we get an animation of Bojack spinning in his chair into darkness. This gives us a title screen of 2 days later, where Bojack wakes up in the bedroom and Diane is asking if he's okay. The first time I watched it, so the first time you watch it, you believe that at this point, there's a point where I think I realise before she turns into a monster.
Yeah.
But I think it does actually seem like this is Bojack waking up.
The moment when she goes to kiss him is when it wasn't
I'd agree.
that he was still tripping.
Yeah. But I do almost think we should have seen it earlier.
Yeah.
Because Diane says, listen, I thought about it and you're right. Your memoir should be a representation of you. It's only fair that you're happy with how you're portrayed. And I want to help write a book we can both be proud of. So this is exactly what Bojack's thinking Diane, that he wants to hear from Diane. So suddenly her eye starts expanding and explodes, leading to her whole body mutating, at which point Bojack asks what's happening and she says she ate too many pancakes.
Yeah, I would say for me, this is the part where I'm like, this trip has gone bad.
Okay, it's now a bad trip.
He's spiraled into places he doesn't want to be. I
suppose I'm going to do a really arrogant thing and just point out the pancakes thing. The pancakes line, I ate too many pancakes.
Why?
Sarah Lynn was going through pancakes earlier in her episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there might have been one other reference that we've had, but I think there's a theme of pancakes and happiness.
Okay.
Or it's one of the things that he ties to a certain emotion. And it's weird that as she's mutating into a horrible person, it's because she's had too many pancakes. Bojack says, oh shit, I'm still tripping. And we get another title screen that says, actually not 2 days later, 2 minutes later.
Yeah.
I think it's quite unique.
I like it. I liked it.
Because when I was watching it this time, I was trying to think of another time that a title screen has deliberately lied to the audience.
Yeah, and then kind of like admits its mistake.
Yes, exactly. It points out that he was lying.
Yeah, no, I liked it.
And all the way up until this point, I've been quite rewatching it this time for this podcast. I've not actually enjoyed the title screens. And I'm almost thinking that all of the title screens we've seen have been a lead up to this one.
Okay.
Because he's had to set out the premise that you have to believe, well, we probably have the premise anyway that we believe a title screen because it's designed to be a direct message, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the fact that we would never think of a show to deceive us over a title screen is, I think is really well done.
Yeah.
So the mutated Diane keeps growing and advancing on him and strangles him and tries to kiss him a bit more. But this is when the animation dives into Bojack's brain and we see Bojack running through his neurons and synapses. There's also a lot of imagery from his past here and in past episodes. So we see things like the telescope, we see Decapathon, but we also see articles about him and his past.
Yeah, it was at this moment when I was like, yeah, we're going on a more... Because up until now, it's been...
Quite a tame...
Not, I wouldn't say... No, it's been a standard cartoon drug episode. Like a wild psychedelic experience, like carnage, interconnected things, like messing with perspective, messing with colours, messing with time and things like that. And like trippy experiences. But this bit, when he goes inside himself, so to speak, this is when we start getting like actual references to his life now and in the past. And this is when you're like, okay, now we're getting deep. We get into the core of who Bojack is, and they're going more on his vision quest kind of thing.
You're right. It does turn it from just a drug scene into the inner workings of Bojack.
Yeah. It goes from being fun to being more of a very deep psychiatric evaluation of Bojack's psyche.
So he gets slapped by one of these synapses, and this gives us a scene of Bojack in high school being laughed at everybody. So I quite like the style of these scenes actually as well, where there's like, it feels like it's like a watercolor sort of. We all know what it looks like, but I'm trying to describe it. It's a blend of colours with the outlines of the characters and the scene drawn in, but they're not individually coloured.
Yeah.
But also, this is one of Bojack's prominent memories that he didn't maybe have a good time in high school either, or whether this is just one moment in high school that caused a lot of distress for him. We now get Bojack running through these memories, and this is Bojack fully coloured in his usual animation, his usual colour. There are memories of him waiting to be picked up from football. There's a memory of the sneezing incident that the news anchor, the news team keep using his picture for, so we see a bit more detail of that. And we also see the...
Oh, I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't know if you would the first time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the middle scene.
That's the one, the picture that they use, and they're like, oh, why did they use that picture?
So we see that whole sneeze scene. And we also see Herb saying that he will never forgive him. So they're all they're all supposed to be quite negative memories.
Is that the bit where Herb says he'll never forgive him and then crumbles to a skeleton?
Yes.
Yeah.
He also then runs through a diner full of lots of Mr. Peanut Butters before falling out of the diner and hanging onto the V-neck of a giant Mr. Peanut Butter.
Classic.
Classic
Psychedelic way. I feel this is like something out of Fantasia or something.
Okay.
So do we think this is a representation of the dominance of Mr. Peanut Butter now taking over Bojack's position? That like he runs through the diner and sees multiple Mr. Peanut Butters everywhere, and he's like, everywhere I look, I see him. He's like, because on posters, he's on TV. Like he's the star now, and especially when like he ends up clinging onto his V-neck shirt, and Mr. Peanut Butter is figuratively bigger than him now, and in this trip, he is literally bigger than him now, way bigger.
Yes. No, I think it definitely is. But Bojack falls off Mr. Peanut Butter's V-neck and lands onto a grey background where his outline disappears. And Bojack says, okay, stay calm. I don't have any outlines anymore.
I like this.
That's okay. There are no boundaries between me and space. Do we why do you like it?
I don't know. I just thought it was a cool little visual joke, and like the deeper comment of there's no boundaries between me and space. A lot of people, when they have strong psychedelic experiences, they experience a oneness with everything.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
So the boundary between where I end and everything else begins, that's gone. Yeah. Like I'm one with everything. I'm connected to everything.
This leads to him leaking out of himself, which leads us into an image of him swimming, or we'll use the phrase treading water. But he's actually swimming in the picture behind his desk in his office, where one horse is in the water swimming and there's another horse watching that horse swim. We zoom out a bit more and we see another Bojack and Diane looking at this picture, and Bojack asks, should we help him? And Diane replies, no, he loves treading water, which I think is actually him. So this is all obviously happening in his head, but I think this is actually a point that he's making to himself about not getting anywhere in life.
I didn't see it that way.
Did you see it?
When she says he likes treading water, I was like, yeah, he does.
Right, literally treading water, or
no, like in his life.
Mm.
You said you don't think he's happy like that.
Oh, right.
I think he is, because if he wanted to change his circumstances, he'd have to change who he is. He'd have to work on himself.
Yeah.
He'd have to push himself out of his comfort zone.
Right.
He'd have to work hard. Yes. He'd have to try something new, and he doesn't want to do that.
So the Bojack in the picture then falls out of the swimming pool onto a creased bit of paper and starts running like a flickbook animation. But in this flickbook animation, the Bojack drawing gets reduced down to its simplest shapes, and then eventually to a stick man drawing, and then eventually a pencil comes out and the rubber tip of the pencil erases him from the page.
Another classic animation.
Yes, yeah.
This has been done so many times. Even Mickey Mouse has had this treatment at some point.
Yeah. So Bojack now appears on the set of Horsing Around with Ethan, the boy from Horsing Around. Bojack asks why everyone is laughing, At which point Herb comes onto the set and says, "Get your head out your ass, BJ. Your line is, 'This is all I am and all I'll ever be.'" Which Bojack repeats, and Ethan says, "You can say that again, old man." But then on the other half of the set, we see Charlotte walking off into the trees towards a cabin.
They were just going to gloss over that. This
You tell us what
probably one of the deepest cuts so far in the episode.
Okay.
The thing that we know him for, horsing around, the thing that everyone knows him for, and the thing that this whole show is based off.
Yes. This is all you'll ever be known for.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like, it's such a meta commentary on the whole situation.
Yes.
For us watching the show,
Yes.
for people in the show watching the horsing around show, the whole mess that he's in now comes from this exact thing, which is his greatest blessing and his greatest curse.
Yes.
Everything that he has and everything that he's received that's good has come from his success on this show. And everything that's bad and everything that's gone wrong in his life is a byproduct of his success on that show. So that line that he's been forced to say is probably the truest thing that he's said, and he probably hates it.
Did you sort of mention there the fact as well that he's been forced to say this line? This is his line in the show.
Yeah.
As well. So
Yeah.
this is, as he's been given this show and this life that he's in, he's also been given the line in this vision that he's having.
Yeah.
To say this, but also I would say it's also probably like I'm quite interested in the last bit of that as well, where he says, "And all I'll ever be."
Yeah, it's like his greatest fear.
Yes, that will be nothing else.
Yeah.
Again, like the cheesy sitcom line that Ethan says about "you can say that again, old man," reinforces it, but also reinforces the like. We've had a few comments from Bojack about him getting old, so I think he's probably struggling with death denial. But then we see Charlotte on the other half of the set walking off into the trees towards the cabin, and again, just like this really like soft heavenly music is playing. Back on set, there's a young Sarah Lynn asking Bojack to make her a peanut butter and veggie sandwich.
Yeah, because he asked her to repeat it.
And then she's a lot older. She's like the Sarah Lynn we know now, and she shouts at him, doesn't she?
Yeah. But the first time I heard it, I was like, did she say penis or peanut? And I think Bojack's thinking the same thing. Like, can you wait? Say that again. And then she confirmed that she said penis butter.
But again, I think it's hinting at the sexuality aspect of a young girl
and his part in that, which goes back to his guilt from the episode where he's trying to help her.
So Bojack now sees a vision of Todd as an old man and two paths leading off into the distance. So this old version of Todd says, "Well, it's not too late to say no, Bojack. This is the road you chose." Bojack then starts sinking into the floor and asking someone to help him because the floor is made of tar. At which point Charlotte appears on the sofa next to him and says, "Why don't you come with me? Come to Maine." And Bojack says he can't because he's stuck. We then cut to Bojack as a child hid under the table and his mother telling him to go out there. At which point a young Bojack just says that he can't. And this obviously looks very similar to the scene that we saw Sarah Lynn's episode start with, where Sarah Lynn was under the table and Bojack was trying to give her some words of encouragement.
Okay, yeah.
Although she doesn't say anything that Bojack says, I don't think. I didn't go back and rewatch that episode.
Okay.
She's telling him to go out there and perform. So Bojack says that he can't, and his mother says, "Can't lives in a house on Won't Street."
I like that. And I don't know if it's a common phrase, but I've never heard that. But I like it.
I was going to say, I think I have heard it, or phrases similar to that, and maybe not directly like it. Like can't means won't, can't or won't. She says, "You will not embarrass me in front of the entire supper club. I told them you were going to sing the Lollipop song." But Bojack says he doesn't feel like singing. And his mother goes on to say, "Nobody gives a damn what you feel. You've got an audience out there and they want to hear you sing. Now you want your mummy to love you. You go out there and you do the only thing that you're good for, which is singing the goddamn lollipop song. And let me tell you something, the secret to living forever is, and we sort of fade out there a bit. Well, shall I just mention how awful his mother is for forcing him to perform?
Yeah, and also the impact that will have on his entire life by saying that the only way that people will love you is by performing. Yes. Which is kind of the same thing that he says to Sarah Lynn as well.
It is, yeah. No, like I said, I was trying to think whether there was any direct quotes from that, but I don't think there isn't. After she says this leads us to see his mother's grave and his father's grave. And then when Bojack falls over, it's revealed that his grave is there, and engraved on it is whom no one remembers. Which again is this reoccurring theme that people have forgotten about him and he needs to be constant and relevant and he can't die being forgotten. But also I think there was a bit of comedy in the fact that as his mother is saying the secret to living forever is, we switch to see her tombstone.
Yeah.
I think there's something there.
Bojack's mum probably doesn't know the secret to living forever, but we're seeing this through Bojack's perspective, through Bojack's psyche.
Right.
So maybe this is a reference that his mother is so all-knowing and all-powerful in his mind that he might subconsciously believe that she knows the secret to living forever. He sees his mother as being that powerful that she knows the secret to living forever, even though she clearly doesn't.
So we then hear from a Peanut Charlie Brown style version of Diane calling over to Bojack, where she asks Bojack what seems to be the problem. And Bojack says, "Good grief, I'm so depressed. I just want everyone to love me, but I don't know how to make them do it." Diane replies with, "You can't force love, you blockhead. All you can do is be good to people in your life and keep your heart open." Bojack says, "I've screwed it all up. It's too late for me, isn't it?" And Diane says, "I don't know. I'm just a crazy drug hallucination. I'll say whatever you want me to say." To which Bojack says, "Well, tell me it's not too late then." And Diane confirms, "Well, it's not too late. It's never too late to be the person you want to be. You need to choose the life you want." And at this point, the scene starts to get sucked into the background as she says, "That will be 5 cents, please." So as this scene disappears into just a white background, we transition into a snow scene at the cabin in Maine where Bojack is chopping wood. And Charlotte calls out from the cabin to Bojack to say supper's ready. As Bojack goes inside, he makes a joke about someone saying, he makes a joke about someone saying we're in for some weather and how we're always in for some weather, which makes Charlotte chuckle. Bojack also does this little tickle in Charlotte's ear that's clearly a bit of an in-joke with them. And as they hug, Bojack says, "Can we just stay exactly like this for the rest of our lives?" But Charlotte says, "Or we could do the opposite of that because I'm pregnant." And Bojack says, "That's amazing. But this is a bit weird. Charlotte goes here and I'm like 80% sure it's yours."
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, it's really sort of telling that even in Bojack's like dream psyche of this perfect world, Charlotte's sleeping with other men.
Yeah, he's so insecure.
Yeah, so but in this dream he's happy with it.
Yeah, 80% sure. It's good enough for subconscious Bojack. Yeah.
Yeah. It's done really well actually, because the whole scene's just so like romanticized, and then just this little phrase that's inserted in there that just catches us off guard. Out of the window though, we see time pass. It now looks like spring and the baby has arrived, and Bojack comes into the room to play with the child, and they have a cute moment together. A bit more time passes and the baby's now turned into a young child, and they're swimming in the lake together, and they're just sharing a very nice moment. I mean, all of this is about Bojack's other life that he could have had, that is maybe what he'd deem as like a normal life, or a romanticized normal life.
This scene, the audio from this scene is what's subtly hinted at in the background of the final scene as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. This specific scene when she's this age and they're playing together in the water.
Yes. But we skip forward a bit further in time, and Bojack and Charlotte are now watching their daughter swim in the lake with her boyfriend. Bojack says to Charlotte, "What are you thinking about?" And Charlotte says, "Oh, just how nice things could have if you had chosen this life." And sort of in the background of this scene, we can hear a phone buzzing. And this phone buzzing brings us back into the real world, where Bojack is passed out on the floor of the pub car park while it is still raining. And this is the moment I think we really know that we've come out of this drug trip now.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about the whole other life of Bojack that he could have had, or he thinks he could have had? Because this is the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah.
This is him not in these scenes. He doesn't see any of the problems of being in a relationship or raising a child, or everything's very nice. But there's part of him that feels that it might have been nice to have that other life.
Yeah. But also, I can't remember if I must have mentioned this on the podcast before, because it's something I talk about quite a lot. But from the podcast Modern Wisdom, there was a lesson a year or two ago that has just stuck with me forever, of the idea of choosing your regrets.
Yes.
So Bojack now might look at his life and go, he's depressed, he's miserable, and he looks at what he could have had, the life that he could have had with Charlotte, this potential life, this beautiful family, and this peaceful living out in the countryside and whatever. But there's nothing to say that if he had gone down that path, he would now be sat in the countryside in the middle of nowhere thinking, what if I'd have gone down the path of being rich and famous? What if I'd have gone, like, whichever one he chose, he would have some kind of regret. So, yeah, it's nice to think that the life with Charlotte is more wholesome and probably not as damaging to...
Well, I don't think we can say anything.
No.
We can't say.
But that's what's suggested in
it's suggested,
in the trip, in his psyche.
And I think we would have a bias to say that, I don't know, ultimately, if you had two lives in front of you, one with huge amounts of fame and money and wealth, but mental problems, and one with a wholesome family.
Oh, for sure.
I think everyone goes to that wholesome family.
Oh, for sure.
But equally, again, it's not. It's this romanticized vision of what it is. But again, maybe it's just important for us to know that Bojack does think about other paths that he could have taken in his life.
Or maybe, we don't know that he thinks about him, because this is...
Okay.
Like, this might be stuff that he's regrets that he's buried.
Yeah, and now it's just come... Yeah, I like that, actually. So this phone that's ringing while he's just passed out on the floor of this car park is Princess Caroline calling him. And when he answers it, she says, "Bojack, I read the pages you sent me last night, and I have to tell you, your book is absolutely, without a doubt, the most," elevating her tone as she goes, setting it up to be the most brilliant book I've ever read. But instead she goes with gibberish. It's gibberish. Princess Caroline continues to say, "There's 20 pages of Doctor Who erotic fan fiction, a recipe for soup, 5 different theories on how 9/11 happened, and a bunch of embedded YouTube videos." Bojack just ends the call by saying, "I've got to go." At which point we find ourselves now at a ghostwriters convention set up by Pinky. And I've not talked about, well, I don't know if we've had any visual jokes in this episode, or not many, but so under Ghostwriters Convention, it says, "all the ghostwriters you know and love," which is obviously ridiculous because you wouldn't know who the ghostwriters are.
The whole point of being a ghostwriter is they're anonymous.
One member of the audience stands up in this convention and says they've got a question for Tory spelling, but Pinky interrupts and says, "No, Tory spelling's not here, her ghostwriter's here." But yeah, so Pinky's frustrated that this person hasn't understood what's gone on, at which point another member of the audience stands up and asks the question, what is your favourite type of ghost to write for? And again, Pinky's just head in his hands about this whole convention. But now Bojack turns up and he says he's got a question for Diane. So Bojack says, look, I'm sorry about all that stuff I said about you earlier. We can publish the book you wrote. You're obviously a better writer than I am. I don't actually even really care what the world thinks of me anymore. I just hated reading that book because I hated feeling like that's how you saw me. Because I guess you know me better than anybody. And if you think that, I guess my question is, do you think it's too late for me? And Diane just seems a bit shocked at this point. But Bojack continues. I mean, am I just doomed to be the person that I am? The person in that book? It's not too late for me, is it? It's not too late. Diane, I need you to tell me that it's not too late. And Diane tries to speak back to Bojack, but he just continues. I need you to tell me that I'm a good person. I know that I can be selfish and narcissistic and self-destructive, but underneath all that, deep down, I'm a good person. And I need you to tell me that I'm good, Diane. Tell me, please, Diane. Tell me that I'm good. And Bojack just stands there quietly waiting for Diane's response, at which point the camera is slowly zooming out to see the rest of the audience. And a member of the audience stands up and says, hey, aren't you the horse from Horsing Around? I didn't mention just then about the music that's in the background of that silence. So as Bojack's waiting for Diane's response, you're right, we do hear I think it's the laughter of the daughter.
It's
playing.
Yeah, and the splashing of the water and stuff. Yeah, it's that whole scene, but it's very subtle.
Yes. The only reason I really tied it in this time is the subtitles.
Okay.
Where it says Harper's laughter plays, or Harper's, because I think that's the daughter's name.
I think this is the first time that we've seen Bojack truly desperate. That's the first time I've seen Bojack beg. I think Bojack's psychedelic experiences, like I said at the start, it's opened up parts of his subconscious that he's been buried for a long time. And obviously the final line being, hey, aren't you the horse from Horsing Around?
Yes.
Is fulfilling the prophecy of the line when he's on set that this is all you'll ever be known for. It's really sad.
It is quite sad. I think, first of all, credit to Will again.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole sort of monologue is, again, I don't know how much is written word by word and how much is ad-libbed, or where it's most likely, I guess, a combination of the two. But I think it's done really well. This is an apology from Bojack here. And I also feel that part of it is quite genuine as well. It feels like a very honest apology, and it doesn't feel like he's hiding anything. He seems like he actually does want to make up with Diane. Or he feels like other people he's offended in the past, he hasn't tried to apologise to. But apart from Herb, who he tried to apologise to, and he said he was never going to forgive him. We just get confirmation here that the book is going to get published, Diane's book. So the rest of the world is going to see what's in this book. So Bojack's accepting he says he doesn't care what the world thinks of him anymore, but he's accepting that this person that Diane's written or is displaying in the book is going to be out there for everyone to read. Yeah, I think that there's a bit of a similarity of when he went to talk to Herb. I think we talked about how Herb might have been one of the only people who really knew him. He felt like if Herb liked the real Bojack and forgave the real Bojack, he would have peace with that, because everybody else doesn't know the real Bojack. Mm-hmm. And now Diane's sort of fallen into that place of Herb. So he says here about, I want, you know the real me.
Only people that know the real Bojack can cast judgment on
Yes,
Bojack.
exactly, yeah, because he doesn't care about the other people.
Yeah.
But also he needs, like, this sort of, I feel like this is the lack of attention or love he had as a child coming through again as well, where he says, I need you to tell me I'm a good person. Like that, the way he says it feels like it's coming from someone that's never, or feels like he's never been told that, like, authentically. Asking about if he's doomed to be the person that he is, or if it's possible to change. I think it. I know we said he has displayed some awful traits, but again, this is another moment where he's acknowledging he's got awful traits, and is at least potentially open to the opportunity of change, but he doesn't know whether it's physically possible.
Yes.
For the want of a better word, he doesn't know whether it's possible for someone that's done as many bad things to change, which I think is interesting.
Earlier on, I said I thought it was sad.
Yes.
And when I initially watched the episode, I did think that there is sad undertones, but it's not all sad, because if we look at it like we were talking about the crying in the shower thing earlier, this is a real turning point for Bojack. It's a moment of growth.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, this might be his lowest point, but if it really is his lowest point, then the only way is up.
Yes. So,
like, if he's acknowledged what an awful person he is, and he's asking for forgiveness and asking for a way out, then that shows that this is a real inflection point. This is a turning point. This is a moment of growth. So, on the surface, it seems sad, but actually,
right, it's
because you could see it as being a positive thing.
Yeah, because the only way is up, sort of.
Yeah.
I do really like how the episode ends with, "Hey, aren't you the horseman horsing around?"
Yeah.
Because we've not actually, I don't think we've heard that line for a long time.
Yeah.
In it for a good couple of episodes, but it's weird how it sticks with us, and it's so I think there's this sort of contrast of such a meaningful, deep, hard monologue, and then just this real blazing, "Aren't you the horseman horsing around?"
But it's also extremely poignant.
Yes,
because
it's emphasising that's all he's ever going to be. Yeah. So, but like I say, it works on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
But if not anything else, just emphasising the long joke. This feels like a season finale to me.
It does. It ends on a big cliffhanger.
Like that speech that he gives, and not hearing Diane's response, it feels like a series finale.
And it ends on a downer.
It is a downer ending. So. Yes. Go on then. Let's finish this off. I think let's talk about. I mean, is there a favourite visual joke? This isn't a joke-heavy episode.
There's a lot of visuals, though.
There is a lot.
Mostly visuals. Yeah, there's quite a few little things that I enjoyed. The Todd and Bojack when they're talking about the brooms and the guns.
Okay.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the title screen getting it wrong and then getting back.
Yes.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed Bojack missing his outline.
But it was like, okay, there's quite a few.
But I do like it when I really like it when art style changes.
Okay.
There's a few cartoons have done this over the years. South Park have done it extremely well on a number of episodes. The World of Warcraft episode, when they literally take animation from World of Warcraft. There's one episode where they get ninja weapons, and every time they're using them, it goes into like an anime art style, and it's just totally different to the normal style. I like it when you go outside of what you normally expect from the art style, and obviously in a psychedelic heavy episode like this, there was going to be a lot of that, so I did enjoy that. I liked the deep dive into Bojack's psyche, and like you see a lot of the stuff from his past and like who he is, like the issues with horsing around and like this is all you'll ever be known for and stuff. But then also the present day stuff, like the prevalence of Mr. Peanut Butter. I like this episode because not just because of the art style and whatever, but also because it really digs into like psychology. I do enjoy that. That's a topic that's quite close to my heart. So, but I still don't. There's something holding me back, and I don't know what. We'll go for 6 for now.
There's a big but there, I feel.
It's so different to all the other episodes.
Okay. I feel like it has given you a lot to think about this episode, about the whole show.
When I finished the episode, I was like, yeah, that's probably a 6. And then as we've been discussing it, I'm like, yeah, I like this, I like that.
Is there more and more you like and less you don't like then?
Yeah, but it still doesn't make me want to bump it up to a 7 for some reason.
Out of interest, what don't you like about this episode then?
It's so fucking heavy, man. Like,
Okay.
this. I've said this before. If I watch cartoons, I want to be entertained. And, like, this was so deep cutting and, like, full on. And like I said at the start, I think maybe because of my recent experience with psychedelics and trauma, I don't know if that's affected the way that I see it, that it's like, I don't know if it's affected it in a good way or a bad way. I don't know. I don't know. This episode did hit me more deeply than the previous episodes, but I don't know if it's hit me deeply in a good way or a bad way. It hasn't. I didn't finish the episode and feel good.
No, okay,
right?
Okay. So, shall I just tell you what I think?
Yes.
Because I feel like you're going to think about it for a long time still. But also, I think that's really important because I think it is something that sticks with you. And that's what I sort of remember most about this and this show, is that it sticks with you. And if, I don't know, if art is anything, I think memorable and impactful are 2 words that I would throw into the mix. My favourite visual joke, to go back to that, is the Ghostwriters Convention sign saying, all the ghostwriters you love and know. I didn't want to pick a favourite line out of this show. I said I was going to think about it while we were recording this, but I'm going to abstain from a favourite line from this show, just because I think it would take away from anything about the other lines. And obviously, this episode is defined by this drug use showing us into Bojack's inner thoughts, which I think we've had hints at, but we've not had as much depth as this. It feels like we know a lot more about Bojack's worries and trauma, to use your word from a moment ago. I think the scene was done really well as well. I'm going to call it breaking the 4th wall, but also breaking the animation wall. So by having different animations and the way they did it, well, one, it allowed, like with other shows where they do this, it allows us to see the experience from the character's point of view quite well. But I just think that particularly with the horse being real, the watercolor, and then the Charlie Brown, I liked how we went through all the different art styles, but also how they messed with our own perception of time with the title screens. It worked very well. And like I said, I thought the music was really good on this as well. The sound was really well done, particularly like you noticed at the end with like just that hint of sound at the end to emphasize the thoughts that he has, or the thought that are still going on in his head. I've still got questions about Doctor Who. If there's one part of this episode that lets this show down, that's the point. That's the bit I would point to. I don't think it adds a massive amount. And if anything, it's verging on cultural identities and making jokes of them. The end scene with Diane, when Bojack's delivering his monologue, I think is obviously very moving. Like I mentioned, it's just very well done by Will and the writers. So all in all, I think there's some nice jokes in it. The drug scene just sticks with you. I think that's the best way, and gives you lots of information about Bojack. It makes you humanize Bojack a bit more. I think it makes you empathize with Bojack a bit more.
Is there a meta level here as well, though? Well, that's what the book's supposed to do in the show.
Yes, yeah.
And now this episode does that to us that are watching the show.
So I think the book is a metaphor for the show, or however it is the show. I really struggle to find things that I don't like about this episode or haven't enjoyed. So what's my score going to be, Matthew?
You're going to say 9.
I was torn between 9 and 9.5. Do you know what? I mean, I would take half a point off straight away for the Who bit because I'm still confused. I'm still unsure about that. But I don't know where the other half point is coming from. So it's a 9, mate.
I'm going to upgrade my score.
Okay.
But based on something that you said a few minutes ago about like art moving us or impacting us.
Yes.
Because I'm still going into this thinking, oh, this is a cartoon and I want to be entertained. I want to laugh. I want to have a joke, right?
Okay.
But I've always said, if you define art as being something that moves you or that sticks with you or impacts you, then I would say one of the best films that I've ever seen is a French film called Irreversible by Gaspar Noé. It's horrendous. It's awful. I'm pretty sure that every scene in it is designed to make you want to throw up. Whether that's the movement of the camera, the music, the sound, the content. It's got some of the most horrendously violent scenes. It's so graphic and full on. It's awful. But after I watched it, I couldn't stop thinking about it for about 3 or 4 days afterwards. So I was like, this is obviously had an impact on me. So going by that standard where I'm like, oh, I don't have to necessarily enjoy it for it to have a big impact on me. By that standard, I'm going to bump it up to a 7.
Okay. I didn't point it out in the last episode, but at the end of season 1, we'll do an episode of the podcast where we just digest the whole series, and we'll go into we'll look at the ratings we've given the episodes in a bit more detail, maybe. I'm going to ask Matthew a few questions and he might want to ask me a few questions, but also I thought it would be good if we had some questions from the audience, you guys listening. So if you've got any questions, put them down in the comments, or if you want to keep it a bit more discreet, you can email the Bojack Podcast at gmail.com. Yeah, we'll read them out. Or if there's just any comments or comments about the podcast as well, we can talk about how we're doing the podcast. Maybe there's a new section that someone would like to hear us do instead of favourite visual joke or something like that. Mm-hmm. So any comments or questions, let us know. But in the next episode, we will be discussing series 1, episode 12 later. Thank you for listening.